Howdy folks, I'm Pleasant Peony, peacefully presenting pretty petals.
I'm Amber.
And here are more pretty petals for us to present. Like, for once, I think this actually works as a flower one. We're just a peaceful flower, folks, that's all. Just a flower. Nothing mean or sinister or bad or anything like that. Just look away and mind your business. Let's get started. Alright folks, and our first letter is titled, Am I a Jerk for Not Telling My Parents That the Event That They Were Missing Was My Wedding? Buckle up guys, this is going to be kind of long. So I'm a 27-year-old female and I have a younger brother, Mike, a 21-year-old male. He is the definition of a man-child and a mama's boy. Always complaining, always expecting others to bow to him. Just overall a jerk. Ever since he was born, my parents fussed over him for everything. He's not special needs or had a traumatic birth or anything of the sort. He was just born. And my parents completely discarded me. My mom, a 50-year-old female, especially. She went from a loving mother to one of those boy moms that people make fun of on the internet. My father, a 50-year-old male, still showed me love and support, but he's always been too much of a coward to stand up to my mother and let me win at least once. The only one who stood up for me was my grandfather, a 76-year-old male, who always called my parents out on their BS and never liked my brother. I reminded him of his late wife, my grandma, and we have a very special bond, but he lives on the other side of the country and I could never see him often. Mike knows that our mom prefers him and loves to shove it in my face. Because of this and his behavior, we've always been at odds. He's spoiled, a brat, and an awful human. I can't remember how many times I ended up in trouble for things that I did better than him, or for things that he framed me with. His only talent are his football skills. He won a scholarship to a nice college out of state. My parents didn't spend a dime on my education because apparently my fund had been used to cover expenses after a fire. Just for me to discover years later that she said the money was given to Mike to buy a car and a house. It's at a public university that I met Lucas. He was the first person that I was really drawn to there. Of course, I met new people who are all now my dearest friends, and thanks to them and Lucas, who is my best friend for years before we got together, I managed to move out of my parents' house. Now both Lucas and I are well known in our field and have very good salaries. Now to the main issue. Lucas proposed to me a year ago. We are very private people, so we didn't post it on social media or anything. And when I told my parents, they dismissed it with a, that's nice. I'm starting to think that they downright didn't listen to me at all. We decided that we wanted a nice, simple ceremony and a reception with our friends and relatives. Lucas convinced me to invite my parents and brother, but they never responded to the invite. And whenever I went to visit and began talking about my wedding, and without mentioning that it was a wedding, my mom would always speak over me about my brother's accomplishments and wild adventures. At one point, I got fed up and interrupted my mom to tell her that there was an event that I was planning to organize whose dates were unmovable. She told me that they couldn't attend because my brother was playing his last game of the season that very same day, and they wanted to be there for him. Of course, the favoritism didn't surprise me. They missed my ballet shows and both my high school and university graduations for things about him. And at this point, I wanted to be petty. I told both my parents that it wasn't a problem to miss the event, purposely omitting the fact that it was my wedding, and didn't insist any further. Flash forward to a few weeks ago, I got married. It was perfect. My family, Lucas's family, and our friends were all there, and we had a blast. My grandpa was happy to give me away, and it was just perfect. My relatives asked me multiple times why my parents weren't there. I was honest, and I simply said that they had my brother's game to attend and couldn't come. They gave me a few looks, and my grandpa was visibly angry for a while, but otherwise nothing strange happened. After the reception, Lucas and I left for our honeymoon, and our phones were off for the whole duration of the trip. But once we got back, we discovered that a disaster was welcoming us home. I turned my phone on, and I was unable to unlock it before a swarm of notifications popped up. Most of them were from my mother and brother. Mike called me all sorts of nasty names and insulted me because apparently one of my paternal aunts posted the photos of the wedding on Facebook and captioned it with a very obvious dig at my parents, especially my mom, for missing the wedding. The post apparently went viral in my parents' community, and they've been publicly shamed for the mistreatment of me. It also turns out that my grandpa personally visited my parents to go on a tirade to shame my father, his son, and This happened to the point of tears, and this seemed to be my father's breaking point because he was so distraught for missing his only daughter's wedding and for his father's disapproval that he finally rebelled against my mom and is threatening to divorce her unless she makes it up to me. I think that this is the reason why my mom has been spamming my phone with messages, at first insulting and threatening, and then downright pitiful, full of begging and pity parties. Now I'm at home with my husband deciding how to approach the situation. Most of my relatives, even those that I didn't invite to the wedding, reached out to apologize for what I went through and to claim that they had no idea that this was happening at home. I can't blame any of my relatives. They all live with my grandpa on the other side of the country or in another state. But my mom's sister and friends are belittling me for not telling my mom about the wedding, because now she's inconsolable at the thought of having missed my wedding. Personally, I just think that she claims this to save some face, but I'm not sure. The last message from my father and my mother seem extremely saddened and hurt for missing the wedding. Now my family is divided on three fronts. The majority who are sticking by my side, my maternal aunts shaming me for hurting my mom's feelings, and my maternal grandparents who are adamant that I forgive my mom in light of her atonement. My best friends are telling me not to listen to them. So Reddit, am I the jerk? Edit, thank you so much for the feedback and love. It's quite overwhelming. I am going to address the most popular questions here. 1. I did inform my parents about my wedding. I sent traditional paper invites to all of my guests and was notified that all the invites had reached the addresses. I did not receive any answer of any form from my parents and Mike, a few very distant relatives, and some people on Lucas's side. I did reach out to all of them through Messenger to double check, and those who hadn't replied to me told me they couldn't come. I asked my parents and brother via text, and they didn't respond. I was left on red. Knowing them and giving all the things that I had planned, I just didn't even bother to insist. 2. I didn't repeat the date of the wedding because I had already been told that it was my brother's game. Plus, every time I insisted on highlighting my celebration to get an answer, I was always told that it wasn't that important and not to be like this around my brother, because some things are just more important than me. At this point, I think that it's fair for me not to insist anymore. It's not worth the effort. 3. I didn't keep my wedding a secret. I avoided telling my parents that it was the wedding to see if they would be interested in the slightest, but surprise, surprise, they weren't. Despite this, I did openly talk about my wedding with my aunts and uncles. My mother was in the same room with us a few times when I discussed venues or dress shopping with my aunt, the Facebook post one. But sometimes my mom was on the phone, other times she was just chatting with other people. She never really paid attention. When I talked about it during reunions, she smiled and said, "That's great, dear," and then would change the subject. Radio silence on Dad and Mike. 4. I kept in contact with them because, well, all the times that I tried to go no contact in the past years, I've been harassed. I tried after my high school, bachelor's, and master's graduations, to which they never bothered to show up for reasons involving my brother. Every time I was shamed for daring to turn my back on my family by my parents, my brother, my maternal aunts, and my maternal grandparents. I think that the turning point here is that all those times Lucas wasn't by my side. We started dating a little after my last attempt of going no contact, and now that I have him here, I feel more confident in my stance. But before that, I wasn't this confident. As I already stated, all of my paternal side lives on the other side of the country and wasn't aware of how they were treating me. I did try to expose my parents once when I was 14. My aunts, uncles, and grandpa reprimanded them. They faked being sorry, and then once they got home, I got a beating and gaslighting of my life for lying. After that, I kept contact regularly with my paternal side, but omitting my parents' abuse out of fear, which, to be honest, still haunts me to this day. Only Grandpa knew, but he was always threatened to be alienated if he tried anything. 5. My parents and I are not from the same city. I live an hour drive from them, and they don't know my new address because once my brother tried to break into my apartment to steal some cash, and my mother backed him up, claiming that siblings share their goods. Now I moved, and I'll be sure not to tell them where I live. 6. My parents didn't buy my brother a car and a house before he even started high school. They bought him a car for his 16th birthday, and the house near his college when he began his freshman year. They didn't spend the money on my fund right away. They just lied to me and used it later for my brother, keeping it stored for later in the meantime. All right, folks, what do you think of this one?
Not the jerk. Honestly, I think OP handled the situation just fine. I would have totally understood if she didn't invite them to begin with. These
Hmm.
people are not good people. They're not good parents. They do not deserve to be in Opie's life.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why OP didn't really say it explicitly or try to remind them about the wedding is probably because they didn't want them there, which I can't blame them. But at least they have like the plausible, like they actually sent them invites, they
Mm-hmm.
sent them, reminders, but it was their choice at a certain point to just ignore OP and not actually go to the wedding. And I do want to say something about the dad real quick.
Mm-hmm.
The dad is throwing this whole pity party of like, oh, we have to do something about this to make things up, or I'm gonna divorce. BS. I'm gonna call BS on that because he could have responded to the invite. He could have done any number of things to make sure that he was at this wedding.
Right. He's been, consistent pattern of behavior. He did not make an effort to attend any of OP's other events
Mm-hmm.
either. And it doesn't matter, like he actively chose to go along with his wife. And so now that he's just, oh, boo hoo, I can't believe I just missed my daughter's wedding. He made many, many choices over the years that
Mm-hmm.
led him to this point.
Well, and it's all crocodile tears,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like what happened with OP when they were 14, right?
Mm-hmm.
They did the exact same thing where they were all apologetic after getting reprimanded by family members, and what they're going to do is turn around and bite OP if they could, right?
Right. I mean, when OP was 14 and abused, was he part of that abuse? Was he complicit? When they took her college fund and gave it to the brother, was he part of that decision? Was he complicit?
Yeah.
Any number of places he could have done something and
Mm-hmm.
he didn't. And he would have had backing. His father would have backed him up.
Oh yeah.
But he just feels bad now because he got chewed out by his father.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't think that he's that sad. I don't really think that he's that sorry. I don't think he's any more sorry than his wife is. I think he's just doing this to try saving what little face he has because he looks bad. And guess what? He looks bad for a reason.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say it's totally fine to go no contact with them and with any relatives who support them. If you want to, you could show them the abusive text to like as like a last step. It be like, this is what my parents are really like. But if they're not going to believe you or support you, you don't need them in your life.
Exactly. But let me know what you folks think. So, anyhow, take care and good luck. Alright, folks, and our next letter is titled, Am I a Jerk for Reminding My Friend That She Married for Intelligence and Look Where It Got Her? And Amber wants to read this one.
I'm a 35-year-old female, and I met my husband Vince, a 36-year-old male, after he saved me from drowning at a pool party when I was 18. I took him out for lunch the following week to thank him for saving me, and we soon fell in love and began dating. At the time, Vince worked a blue-collar job while I was studying in university. We ended up getting married, and Vince supported me throughout my entire education up until I got my PhD. Vince always told me that he wanted to study in university but had learning disabilities that made it difficult for him to study in a classroom. At times, he was embarrassed by the fact that he had to work twice as hard compared to people around him, but I always found that to be an admirable thing about him. When I finished my studies and got a well paying job, I convinced Vince to give his dream of studying another go. Last year, he was finally accepted into a nursing program at our local university. He is working hard to achieve his dream, and I'm incredibly proud of him. Last week, my friend Alba, 36-year-old female, came to visit with her son so our children could play together. Alba was my roommate during my first year in university. She began dating her husband Leo around the same time I started dating Vince. Leo was an obnoxious law student who later on became an even more obnoxious attorney. He was a know-it-all who prided himself on his intelligence, which for some reason attracted Alba. At the time, Alba would sometimes tease me that I could do better than Vince and would offer to set me up with one of Leo's law school buddies, but I would always refuse and she eventually dropped the subject. Alba and Leo are currently going through a nasty divorce that stems from him cheating on her. Quite frankly, he is dragging her through the mud and it is using connections to try and leave her as penniless as possible. As we were chatting and catching up, Alba began to express concern over the fact that my eldest son, 7-year-old male, was recently diagnosed with dyslexia. Alba began telling me how she is worried that my son will be academically challenged like his father and what that could entail for his future. Before I could respond, she told me how I should have married someone smart while I had the chance so I would have kids like hers. Alba's son is an incredibly bright boy and a straight-A student. I told Alba her advice was unnecessary and reminded her where marrying for intelligence got her. I then proceeded to tell her that I would rather have my son grow up to be an honest, hardworking person like his father than an academically gifted jerk who wasn't smart enough to know sleeping with his secretary could have consequences on his marriage like her husband. Alba was deeply hurt by what I've said and stormed out with her son. Some mutual friends are now chiming in and telling me that I was too harsh on Alba for using her failing marriage to prove my point and should apologize. Small update. First of all, I want to thank you all for your replies. I wanted to address a couple of things. Many of you asked why Alba and I remained friends despite her previous remarks. Alba and I grew apart during our 3rd year of university. We only remained friends by association since we had a lot of shared mutual friends. We became close again after our sons started playing basketball together at our local community center and became friends. I figured that becoming a mother made her more mature, and she didn't give me any reason to suspect otherwise. I decided to send her a message saying that the way she spoke about my husband and son was unacceptable, and therefore she is no longer welcome in my home. However, I don't want our sons to lose their friendship, therefore I'm willing to remain civil around the kids and still organize play dates. She didn't reply to me just yet, but I truly hope she loves her son enough to put her ego aside and remain civil for the sake of our kids. I've yet to notify Vince about the entire situation since he is vigorously studying for an important quiz that's coming up next week, and I know that if he heard what Alba said about him and our boy, it would make him upset, and he won't be able to continue studying properly. Unless something bad happens in the meantime, I'll probably update him next week after he's done with the quiz.
Alright, folks, what do you think of this one?
Not the jerk. I mean, I think it was warranted. The way that Alba was behaving is inexcusable. I mean, first of all, dyslexia is not an intellectual disability.
No, it isn't.
Secondly, even if people have intellectual disabilities, that doesn't make them lesser people.
No, exactly.
You know? And there's all kinds of different forms of intelligence, you know. An IQ test is a very, very narrow and biased measure, and it doesn't mean an awful lot.
Well, and I'm wondering where she's getting her idea that he isn't a very smart person. Is it just that he hasn't gone to college, or is it that he struggles with school?
I think it's the fact that the husband has learning disabilities and didn't go to college straight out of the bat.
And I mean, I think that you can't judge somebody, for being unintelligent because they have something like dyslexia. There are really intelligent people who do have dyslexia, and it doesn't mean that they're not smart. It just means that they have a hard time reading or keeping words in their heads and stuff like that. I mean, I suspect that I have dyslexia, and I don't think that I'm an unintelligent person. I struggle to read, and that's something that is, something that I have a trouble with.
Yeah, well, and the thing about school is that luckily we are moving in a direction where there are more accommodations now than they are in the past. So probably when Vince was going through school, it was even harder because there were fewer accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
But even with that, our traditional classroom environment doesn't work for everyone's needs. And again, that doesn't mean that people are unintelligent just because they aren't getting all A's or, aren't thriving in a traditional classroom environment.
Yeah.
It's tailored to a very narrow set of learning styles.
Yeah. So let me know what you folks think, though. So anyhow, take care and good luck. All right, folks, it is tea time. Grab your beverages of choice. I've got some tea right here, and Amber, she has a jovial bobsang joke.
Where did the fortune teller go on her vacation?
I should have seen this one coming.
You should have.
I should have seen this one coming. She went to Albany, I can't, I'm so flustered. She went to Albany, New York.
To Palm Beach.
Palm Beach? Yeah, that checks out. And I have Mega Mint. Alright, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for watching. Happy Friday, Junior, folks.
Happy Friday, Junior.
Thanks so much to Amber for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Amber, we need some kind of moral advice and or guidance, and please have it in the form of a wedding invite.
You are cordially invited to an event. If you can't be bothered to find out what this event is, you don't deserve to be there.
I think that's about right. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
Bye.